Greetings! It is I, your archivist, and today I want to start off with a question. What if I told you that the essence of great writing and amazing world building, at their core, were fundamentally the same concept? And that you are actually using this on a daily basis, but you don't know. It's one of those things you're doing automatically. But when you do know, and you're able to bring this up into your awareness, what you will be able to do is access the treasure trove of stored information, of wisdom and insight that comes from your lived experience. And that you will be able to use this to craft amazing storytelling stories. That was weird. And world building. You will be able to access the potential that lies within you already. So if that sounds good, then stick around. Now, I have broken this up into two parts. One starts with a quote that I agree with John Truby about, and the other is a quote I disagree with John Truby about. The second part is a little more nuanced. So, anyways, we'll get there. It'll all make sense. All right, so let's talk about the quote that I agree with. John Truby says, Truby, his name is John Truby, not Truby. John Truby says that the essence of stories is that they define life. I agree. As a storyteller myself, I think stories are highly important. I think that people who are not storytellers would agree and say stories are highly important. Stories are how we access the kind of nuances of life. We tell these kind of lies, and that's kind of ultimately what stories are, right? They're lies because they're not true, but this is not for the sake of deception, although some stories are. We don't want to get into that nuance. That might be another video. If you want to see that kind of a video where we're getting into the nuance like that, comment below. Okay, plug aside. Stories allow us to deal with kind of condensed, less complex and less nuanced versions of life, right? Because like life is messy. And so what stories allow us to do is that we condense down the mess to be hyper-focused so that we can talk about themes and ideas and cut to the root of like, what does it mean to be alive? Or what does it mean to be human? Or what does it mean to exist in this modern world? All that kind of stuff. Or what does it mean for the bard to fall in love with the dragon? Excellent questions, deep philosophical questions. But stories allow us to examine life in a way that nothing else seems to do. To me, they're the ultimate art. You can do a painting, it can speak 1,000 words, but stories speak tens of thousands of words, so checkmate artists. Anyways, nothing against art. Artists are great. I love artists. And storytellers are artists too. That was a weird distinction. Okay, we're moving on. All right, so I'm going to move to a kind of anthropological concept here. Now, these are generalities. If you want more depth, more meat, then we may have that conversation. Again, another video, comment below, plug aside. Versus plug inside. I don't know if I should say that. Oh, well, I just did. Oops. That's what my ADD gets me. So, that being said, here's some anthropological concepts. These are generalities. You want more meat, again, comment or do your own research. You will not go wrong as a world builder by looking through anthropological texts. The research will be great. It will value you greatly. You will see the world through the eyes of other people and recognize how foreign, how alien, how different that it is. But ultimately, how similar we are. It's weird. Anyways, that aside. Okay, so what do stories do for us in a kind of anthropological means? What are they helping? Well, first, I think that the exploration of experience and alternate realities. This can be myth. I think myth does this a lot, and it does it very well. I'm going to have a whole story on myth. I'm going to tell you about myth. It's going to be great. Ask anyone. The myth. Okay. That aside, stories also have done a great job at transmitting cultural concepts and ideas. It's very interesting when you look at like anime versus Western stories or even Western anime, right? Like the way in which they get pulled out through the medium and how different they are, it's, well, cultural concepts and ideas. The other third, creation of social cohesion and identity. Stories just, they do give us our identity, don't they? Like you have the American dream that has been the American identity up until, God, mid 2000s, mid 2010s, when we started watching that concept erode and our identity and belief in what it means to be American has been eroding. They also leave, oh, quick note though before we go on. Social cohesion. This has been really great because it has given a shared identity. Ethnic groups tend to have similar myths. The Greeks had their myths, but you can also see like Mexican culture has its myths. Its stories, that its people, its paragons. These are shared concepts and identities. Again, we'll get to the concept, and it'll all make sense once you see this. It's so simple. It's one of those things when I'm explaining philosophy to my son, he gets so frustrated, and he's like, oh my God, when I finally give him the answer, right? Because I make him work for it, and sometimes he gets it, sometimes he doesn't. But when he doesn't get it, he shakes his fist and is like, damn it, how was it that simple? And I'm like, well, it took someone like 20, 30, 40, maybe 1,000 hours of thinking it through to go, it's simply this. It's simply this. And it's incredible. I love those moments. My uncle does this to me all the time, and I'm like, yeah, God, it's so simple. Anyways, sorry. Stories also leave emotional and psychological impacts on us. If you watched Endgame and you'd watched all the other movies from Marvel, that movie left an impact on us. I remember crying at certain parts of that movie. And I remember cheering. One of the weirdest things, quick side note, about not Endgame, but Infinity Wars, that I will never forget so long as I live. Maybe even into my next life, who knows, right? But, jokes aside, one of the things I remember is that we came out of Infinity War, and I remember another group of people, and they're walking out, and they're like all melancholy, their shoulders are down, they're kind of walking like this, and their heads down, and they're like, and they said, we lost. And I will never forget that. The movies were so good for that person that the idea of the Avengers losing, of Thanos winning, it was so devastating that to that person, they had lost. They shared in that loss. That is what good stories do. That is what good storytelling does. That is what good world building provides the framework for. So, okay, anyways. Stories are also been entertainment and a way to escape. And I do think that's probably an earlier, or a later invention, right? This is not very old. I don't know what I'm talking about. It's just a guess. Flame me in the comments if you want. But also, and in kind of encapsulating all this, you should come to realize that stories are simply tools. They're tools to do a lot of amazing things. But they also can do bad things, like propaganda. So bear that in mind. But also, being a good world builder, you need to bear the negative in mind to create interesting worlds. Okay, so with that being said, let's go to the quote from John Truby that I don't like, that I have not appreciated up until recently. All right, I'm back in focus. Until recently. And this quote, and I'm going to explain why I didn't like it and why I now agree with it somewhat. And here's okay, I'm just going to get on with it. Sorry. John Truby says that stories are moral arguments. I hate that concept. It's like when people say, well, everything is political. And I'm like, yes, you are technically correct, but no. I don't want politics in my story. Now, what I think the problem is there, and this might be another video if I have more to say, but I think I can kind of air it all out now. But if you want a more nuanced conversation, again, plug down in the comments below. Okay. The reason I hate, oh, everything is political is because what people, when they say that, what they mean is, oh, it's all modern day politics. I could understand where you could say Avatar: The Last Airbender has a political message to it. And I'm like, I agree with you. It has an anti-fascist message. It has an anti-war message. But being nuanced, right? It's not like, oh, war is always bad. It's like, no, war is bad in this instance because it hurts people, but not in this instance when it ends up preventing more suffering down the road. Okay? So, I don't like that there's not the nuance of talking about politics in a general sense, meaning promoting good ideas that the state itself could implement. But instead, it's how can I push my own propaganda in the story? And it's annoying. I'm sorry. That's just my opinion. Okay, so John Truby says that stories are moral arguments. Hate it. Hate it. Hate it. Here's the problem that I see. When he says that, I recognize immediately that most people don't understand what morals or ethics, what they are and what they mean. People have a general idea, but it has come to be my opinion as of late that most people's morals and their ethics, they're self-referential. They say, such and such situation, what would I want? Oh, this, that. Okay, that's good. You can see this most in cases of law, where they have no understanding of the basic fundamental values of our justice system, and so they say, I want it to be this way, instead of when you look at it, how the system should work, and it should treat everyone the same, for better or worse, right? We get mob bosses that get off because they know how to use the technicalities and the rules and all that, right? But generally, it's a better principle than to say, we don't want this person to have rights because we want to lock them up, because we've, as the mob, made our decision, okay? Morals and ethics, those two words are pretty much the same. I used to split them up in different. I had a long conversation with my uncle, and he kind of ridded me of those ideas. I felt his arguments were much better than my arguments, so I changed my opinion. As a mature person should do. You should change your opinion. I'm so sick of seeing people who will not change their opinion and will go down with the ship just because they feel like to change your opinion means that you are somehow lesser of a person, because you'd have to say you were wrong at the beginning. Anyways, all right, tangents aside, we're almost 13 minutes in. Let's get to it. Okay, so I will be using the term morals and ethics synonymously, interchangeably. So, here's the problem that I have with John Truby saying that stories are moral arguments. First off, on a cultural level, morals are ambiguous. Morals are cultural and often institutionally specific. We could talk about American morals or ethical values. We could talk about Christian morals or ethical values. We could talk about Islamic values, moral, ethical. Okay, I'm not trying to make a political statement there. Chill out. We could talk about Buddhist values. We could talk about Chinese values. We could talk about, you get the picture, right? These things are not from a universal lens. These things are from a filtered view from the culture, okay? Awesome? No, not awesome. Also, evolution, there's an evolutionary nature to morality. If you kind of look through time, it has not been that we have done this in a rational way. Rationality surely was a part of it, right? Because, rationally, there's a great probably argument to say we should have slaves. Ethically and morally, there's amazing arguments to say you're an idiot, slap yourself. Right? So we say persons are better than production. Persons are better than products. And I think that was the right way to do it. But we didn't always use morality morality or rationality to develop our morality. Even though if you read the Nicomachean Ethics, which is the foundations for all of ethics, is that they say the way that you find morality and ethics, how you do this is through rational thinking. Anyways, what I'm getting at is that this has kind of been sloppy. Culture is very sloppy. It's very messy and inconvenient. It doesn't take into rational arguments, though sometimes rationality does prevail. So keep that in mind. When you're world building and we say make it logically consistent, we don't mean that it's logical and without flaws, is that there is an internal logic that is there that makes sense. Okay, so anyways, I've kind of gone on a tangent with that long enough. So here's the next problem that I have with saying that stories are moral arguments, and that you can see this very much so in stories, is that stories for a long time, or stories, morality in the West is very black and white. Up until very recently, with the advent of cultural relativism or moral relativism, which, by the way, totally disagree with. That is incredibly not a good idea. You can respect a culture, but disrespect like certain bad values, if that makes sense. Again, I'm going to have a video on that. I've got a lot to say, We'll see if it's valuable to you guys. Now, Western morality typically tends to be black and white. This is problematic. We have cultural and religious influences on our moral standards. What is the moral influence for most of Western? And you can kiss my butt, this is totally still the case. It is Christianity. People are like, oh no, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no. We are still having Christian values to this day. This is not being thrown out. What is being called into question is this concept of universalities of good and evil. Such a bad idea to do that. Again, there will be another video. I've got a whole video that we're planning. I want to make sure that it works for D&D alignment. Like, I have a great system that my uncle came up with and that I'm flushing out, and it's going to be awesome. We have the best alignment system. It's great. Ask anyone. We have the best. Anyway, so, okay, that being aside, so there is a bridge between the gap of the evolution of civilization and the messiness, okay? Okay, I'm sorry. My notes were very poorly written there. Okay, real quick, just to give you an example of how the messiness of cultural evolution works. So for a long time, like 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe even into the 80s, most of our stories were very black and white. Good guys, bad guys, no real nuance. On a general level, there are still really great older stories that had complex nuance that even today most of our stories don't have. And so what we would do, or what we have here, is a dialectic. Here's your philosophy for the day. I've talked about this in other videos, but I'm going to give it a little bit more of a go. Okay, so you have what's called the Hegelian dialectic. So we start with thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis. So your thesis is your original idea, your antithesis is the opposition to that idea, and your synthesis is trying to take the good from the two and bring them together. Okay, so how do we have a storytelling dialectic? And you can kind of think of this as a long-form dialogue that spans generations and centuries. How does this work? Okay, so think of 60s, 70s, 80s, roughly. You have lots of black and white stories. So that's the thesis. That's the originating idea. Now we come into the modern day, meaning the present day. I don't know why I said modern. Present day, and what do we have? We have a lot of gray stories. Why do we have a lot of gray stories? Gray morality. It's because a lot of our stories were black and white. The thesis, and now they became the antithesis, the opposing force, and said, no, we should tell stories that are more nuanced, that are more gray. Okay? Anyways, so let's see where I'm at. Okay, yeah. So think of it as a dialogue. It goes back and forth. So you have one person that kind of proposes an idea, and then a second group or people who come in and go, hey, we think this, actually an opposite, and then what you really want to try to do is pull those in together. So let's talk about what the advantages of the morally gray stories were, okay, as opposed to the black and white stories. They added realism and relatability. By exploring the grays of human behavior, stories became more realistic. They became more nuanced. They became more relatable because not everyone is a paragon and not everyone is a villain. This allowed audiences to reflect and see themselves not only in the story but their world. And it allowed for more nuanced conversations. It allowed for engagement and critical thinking. We don't have any longer this idea of, well, he did everything right, and so we're going to just ignore because he's the good guy, kind of the crappy things he did. You see this a lot of like in police procedurals where they're actually breaking the law while they are, quote, upholding it. And they're not good because they develop in a sense of morality in the audience that cops, as long as they're doing their job, right? And of course, the cops that they're showing are always doing the right thing. Their goal is to help people. It is not showing the reality. And I don't, look, cops are, it's a complicated matter. I think they're necessary for society, but I also think you have to hold them accountable. And I don't think that police procedurals do a very good job with the public understanding that nuance. They reduce it down. They go, oh yeah, they can just search without a warrant because, you know, well, we knew they were the bad guy. We got to see them do the bad thing, right? Creates a bad precedent. Anyways, so morally gray stories help us engage with critical thinking and engage with the story itself. It invites the audience in to go, wait, so think of it like this. The author, instead of making a statement, if you've seen Worldbuilding 101, you know where I'm going, they asked a question instead. They say, was the hero of the story validated in what they did? Yes or no? Instead of saying, the hero was good, therefore they were validated and they did the right thing. Case closed. Don't want to hear you talk. I just want to hear your applause. Great. Okay. Fantastic. The other is that they allowed for the exploration of ethical complexity. Black and white thinking tends to, you'll see a sort of laziness there because you can't deal with complicated situations and then have black and white thinking. Because what you got to do is take everything to a universal, meaning all the way out and say lying is never good, right? And then you get all the complexity and all that there. Go read Kant if you want to deal with that. Anyways. But here are the disadvantages, and we're starting to see this a lot in modern filming. The disadvantages are ambiguity and confusion. They lack a clear moral boundary that can lead to ambiguity and confusion. Oh wait, I already said that. Anyways, potentially alienating audiences who would prefer a more straightforward message. And again, I should have said black and white thinking is not necessarily, or black and white thinking is bad, but black and white stories aren't necessarily bad. And there's ways to do it. Black and white stories are okay for kids shows. It's a little more acceptable with the younger age. As we get older, we do want to have more nuanced conversations. Their impact, their emotional impact. The complexity of morally gray stories can lead to feelings of cynicism or nihilism as audience grapple with the absence of clear moral resolutions. Yes, this is, unless your thematic question is dealing with this, yeah, it can be bad. It's not good. So cultural resistance. Some audiences may resist morally gray narratives, seeking stories that provide clear moral guidance and affirmation of traditional values. As someone, you probably will figure this out. I'll just say it. I'm a progressive person, but I also think that there are some conservative values that are valuable. I'm not a one or the other. I'm a kind of I've always been a sort of yin-yang. It's not this or this. I don't like false dichotomies. I'm like, what works here and what works here, and let's put them together. As Kreia said, favorite Star Wars character. Kreia said, to love something, a belief, an ideal, if you love it, you'd be willing to betray it. That's all I'm going to say. We'll go on. All right. So we've come to the moment. It's here. It's now almost at 25 minutes. I have built up to this moment to say, here's the answer to the original question. What is the core fundamental part of what it takes to be a great world builder and a great writer? What is it? What is the question? or what is the question? I just gave you the question. I'm sorry, what is the answer? All of ethics boils down to this. Ethics, writing, world building, storytelling. At their core, it's all a conflict of values. Let that sink in for a minute. It is a conflict of values. What does that mean? What does that mean? Justice is a value. Love is a value. Freedom is a value. Wealth could be a value, right? We may not say it's the best value. Being productive is a value. Anything can become a value. And so at the end of the day, everything that's going on in your life and the choices that you make, the decisions that other people make, what you see is valuable, the problems, the complexity that you have in your life, comes from what you see as valuable, and it's the confliction of those values. So, how do we explore these values? As I said, value can be anything. It could be love, glory, power, individuality, education, freedom, honor. Now, these are broad terms. Remember, these can be like, think about your thematic question from World Building 101. You want to take the nebulousness of the topic, right? So we say freedom, and let's draw it down to kind of a particular type, such as freedom versus oppression, freedom versus censorship, freedom versus responsibility, freedom versus inherent limitations. So think about when you pick a value, think about it as a question. So when we'll take freedom, we're going to ride the freedom train. So what does it mean to be truly free? I ask this, and I would say humans cannot be truly free. We're bound by biology and other limitations. Now we have free will, and our free will seems to be infinite because we can imagine anything. The problem becomes when we try to take freedom into action, or not freedom, free will into action. We've hit limitations. But this is a great way to think about gods. The higher up, so like we could say Zeus, right? He has certain limitations. He's not a god like a 3.0 god like we have with the Christian Judeo god. So that, anyways, what does it mean to be truly free? Got it. Okay. Can a person be truly free? What limits our freedom? Is there such thing as free will? What is worthy of limiting our freedom? So when you're trying to develop values for your culture, your writing, your world building, oh, and by the way, this is how you build character arcs. Like, this is seriously the fundamental, easiest way I have ever figured out to build character arcs. Kung Fu Panda, his value is Kung Fu, but he also has self-esteem issues. And what he has to learn is to value himself, to recognize that he is the chosen one. It's like the same concept for The Matrix, right? Like, it's so funny to me how the plot of those two movies, when you reduce them down, they're basically the same thing. Go think about it. It's hilarious. So when we're thinking about building out conflict of values, what we're doing is that we're working to be specific, but also have multiple interpretations. I don't see this, like in lower end writing, I don't see this done enough. It's just, oh, well, free will is, you have free will. And it's like, or you don't have free will. It's all determined. And it's like, yeah, but there's a spectrum that you could have been playing with there. There could have been all the nuances of, well, you have free will, but if you're a god, you have like this much capacity for free will. And if you're a human, you have this much capacity. Well, what if you had, oh, I'm going to tell you a spoiler about some of my books. Advertising, self-sponsorship. I love it. But like one of them that I'm working on is that there is this sort of prophecy magic. And you can kind of usurp someone else's free will by using prophecy. And then you can jack with the processes and it gets a little interesting. Still working the bugs out of that to make sure that it's like, it works, right? It's a hard magic system. I want it to at least, yeah, I think I want it to be a hard magic system. Anyways, I'll probably, again, do a video on that, explaining how that works and how I came up with that system. But anyways, so be specific, but have multiple interpretations. So what do I mean by be specific? Freedom, okay, freedom, dealing with freedom and limitation. Okay, well, there's my prophecy magic system. Okay, and I pulled it from the values of saying freedom versus, you could say, responsibility, or freedom versus biological limitation. And that could be a value. There could be a value in saying, hey, I value my biology. I don't want to go be a robot. Anyways, it can get weird. Okay, honor. Now think about this, multiple interpretations. Honor means something really different if you're a Greek Spartan versus if you're a Japanese samurai. Now also, it also means honor, also means something very different if you're a Spartan versus if you're an Athenian. Even though Spartans and Athenians are part of the Greek culture, they have different value systems. Now, let's talk about layers of values. Stories are layered. Good stories are really layered, and they do a very good job at layering them. Some of our favorite stories are multi-layered stories. Here's a quick summary of these layers could include. Okay, I've got a worksheet that I'm putting down below, so you don't have to freak out and try to write all this. That's BS. I'm not going to do that to you. So you have narrative layers. These could be high concepts, thematics, emotions, symbolics, which is symbolism, right, in your story, and plot. Character layers. These can be motivation, identity, which is, your background and history. Relationships, internal and external conflicts, belief systems, character arcs. In your setting, you have environmental, historical context, culture, political and economic systems. You have technological and scientific context. You have social structures and institutions. You have religious and philosophical beliefs. You have ecologies and environmental factors, cultural artifacts and media, symbolic and mythological elements, atmospheric and sensory details. Those are all the layers. And by the way, that was not an exhaustive list. I guarantee you someone in the comment section could add to that list. And that is the beauty of community, by the way. Community of ideas. And my son has been wanting to get in the videos. I've kind of been hesitant to do that, but he just did, walking by. Anyway, sorry. So, layers take time to develop. Please, please, please understand this. I have stressed myself out by going, oh my God, this is not complex enough. How do I not have this complexity there? Give yourself time. You're human. Rome wasn't built in a day. Neither will your Rome be built in a day. But you can do this. Just be gradual, and the complexity will come. Now, so also, quick caveat. Don't overcomplicate the story if it doesn't need it. Again, go back to Worldbuilding 101. I talk about a lot of the qualifiers that you need to go through that to understand. Okay. So don't overcomplicate the story if you don't need it, or if it distracts from the story, or whatever you're trying to do, your purpose. Okay. Again, see Worldbuilding 101. Okay. What is the synthesis? Okay, so we had a conflict of values kind of in a dialogue form over how we kind of told the grand narratives of stories, right? We had black and white versus morally gray. These are two opposing values. There's traditional values that are going to be hard-coded and say, here is the line in the sand. This side is good. This side is evil. This is morally acceptable, morally unacceptable. And then the other side that says, black and white, not a line in the sand. It was a line in rock. Jesus. The other is a line in the sand, right, morally gray, to say, no, this is an arbitrary and socially constructed line. We could wipe this easily and move the line over here and say, okay, the line is now over here. And that we can explore why that line changed and why it's here or why it should be here. Now, what is the synthesis? It's to use both. And funny enough, I realized this. Oh, hold on. Oh my gosh, and we're back. It's been a hot minute. It's things happened. I missed you. I know for you it's been a second. You probably haven't missed me, but that's okay. It's okay. So I was talking about the fact that where I originally saw this, and I went, oh yes, this synthesis actually exists between black and white stories and morally gray stories. I think what we are starting to see the synthesis, but I think we were seeing the synthesis before of these two concepts. And but let me back up. So I was talking about, I actually saw the concept originally from Asmongold, and he was talking about Lord of the Rings and how like Lord of the Rings has universal moral archetypes. For instance, like what it good healthy masculinity. Aragorn he's peak masculinity. He is chef's kiss, great masculinity. And the loyalty that you see from Sam. Thank you, brain. You see from Sam. That's a universally good trait. This will be a good trait no matter where in history. So the problem with modern kind of morality in the gray is that you don't end up with this sort of good, wholesome, universal. It's like this very nitty gritty, or it has nihilism and all that. But what's interesting is that we've already been having a synthesis, and our favorite stories, the good stories, actually already have a synthesis between black and white, hard morality. That is to say, not like, anyways, like hard world building, like it's defined, versus soft, which is kind of more ambiguous and undefined. So I would like to mention the late great Avatar, the Airbender series. The one that Nickelodeon put out, not the one that people ruined. I'm just going to say that. I'm going to keep my mouth shut. Anyways, here's the interesting part. For a show that is so complex, ultimately there is a clear distinction between the conflict of the forces of good and the forces of evil. Aang has a whole heroic quest to defeat the Fire Lord. We have character ideals that are black and white. Aang's pacifism and the unity between the team, right? We're not seeing morally gray stuff going on with the team. Now, we do have morally gray elements. Zuko's redemption. Zuko, his whole arc deals with the morally gray. How his honor is not actually honorable, and how Uncle Iroh has to teach him how to be honorable and to be the man that he can become. Uncle Iroh himself is a complex character. He is morally gray. He was a person who back in the day was a warmonger and a general, and he becomes this amazing masculine archetype of like what we should aspire to be as men. There are ethical dilemmas in growth. Katara's struggle with revenge. Again, that is a morally ambiguous kind of situation. And at the end, they kind of give you a sort of black and white answer that revenge is never good. But they don't ever come out and say revenge is never good. Aang says that because he has kind of more of a black and white mentality on it. You see Zuko has a kind of a little different approach because he understands moral ambiguity. Aang's conflict with killing. I do think that there's a moral ambiguity there. I still don't agree with him. I think that the Fire Lord was someone who had to be put out. I think if you look at history and you have a charismatic person, even if he lost his power, he still is a symbol of the people. This would be like equivalent to like Hitler and the Third Reich. If Hitler did survive, yes, I know about the Argentina thing, like just chill out. We're just going to assume all things being equal, okay? But if Hitler had survived, there was a higher likelihood that the Reich could become remanifested, so to speak. So again, I don't agree with it, but I felt it was well played because they had to say, well, he has this, his past lives say, you need to give up what you hold to be valuable for the sake of the collective. And that was great. It was a morally ambiguous situation. I do love that in the end, what they did is they said, well, we're going to strip him of his power. Again, still don't agree, but you know what? I'm not upset with it. I actually enjoyed it. Even though I disagree, it was still such a great story. And even that was a great decision because it led to me disagreeing in a kind of nuanced way instead of going, pacifism. It's a brain dead take, right? Okay. Then in the series, there were also diverse cultural perspectives. They explored the four kingdoms and their perspectives. And even the Water Kingdom had two different tribes that had like basically different ideologies, you know, on the whole. I'm a little rusty at this, but I just, anyways, so don't scathe me, chill out. Just go watch a lore video and be happy. And there was even sympathy for the enemy. The show often portrayed characters from the Fire Nation in a sympathetic light, revealing their personal struggles and motivations and adding depth to the narrative. Not everyone who was, you know, basically part of the fascists was a fascist. And they showed the kind of moral complexity, the ambiguity of life, and that what the citizens of the Fire Nation had was propaganda that said they were the good guys. They were doing the right thing. And yes, insert the meaning of, are we the bad guys? But for real, like, the show had black and white elements as well as morally gray elements. And I think it was good because of that. So there's a balance. Lord of the Rings has this too. There are morally gray aspects and black and white aspects. And the black and white, what it does really well is not say, this is the only way in which the value can manifest, but to say, this is a particular way that this kind of universal loyalty manifests. And you never give up on your friend. You stick with them to the very end. And I can't carry the ring, Mr. Frodo, but I can carry you. God, what a good moment. Like, that will forever be the epitome of what it means to be loyal to your friends. So, there is a balance. And having morally gray concepts only having morally gray concepts leaves no room for deeper meaning that transcends time. This is what you are seeing with modern stories, that they only want to deal with the morally gray ambiguity. I think as a storyteller, you need to not only give the rich nuance of the ambiguity, but to also kind of lay a framework to say, here's also what I think can be the answer. I think too many times people are trying to say, oh, I'm just getting people to question stuff. I'm like, no, you're not. Good shows that make people question stuff cause conversations. Your show didn't a conversation, only caused confusion. I understand where you thought conversation and confusion were the same word because they had con at the front, but that's what you are as a storyteller. You're just a con artist. Okay, enough of that rant. Anyways, so in conclusion, the essence of stories. It is the act that frameworks life. It is how we take life in its complexity and nuance. We actually are reducing it down so that we can draw meaning out of it. It helps us to explore our experiences. It helps us to find meaning, and in doing so, it helps us to define our life. Ethics and morality, storytelling and world building, all can be reduced down to the simplicity of it's a conflict of values. And yet that is everything. It's so simple, but yet it's so much. Okay. Remember that when you are, remember that these go beyond morality. These go beyond cultural and institutional considerations. So when you are building your world, don't just do it from one framework. Have multiple frameworks that compete with each other. This is why, in my opinion, Christian literature, Christian fiction, fantasy, it's the same thing. No, I've read 5 books and they're all the same and they were not as good as Narnia. I'm sorry. And then I read Brandon Sanderson, who is a Mormon, and I'm like, how is this different? What are we doing here, folks? Like, how did he get this? And everyone else is, anyways, I just come at it from different frameworks. Don't make universals. You really need to work on your metaphysics. And even if you're doing from a Christian metaphysic, like, you can do it in a nuanced way. Have different varying truths. Don't just assume that the truth that you're holding up is the truth that, like, if you're doing Christian literature, you can have Christianity as your fundamental truth. But look at the world that you live in. You think that that is the fundamental truth, yet that is not how it is for everyone. Represent that nuance and complexity, those variation and diversity of beliefs, in your story, and it will not be stale. And you will get someone like me to appreciate your story. Now, stories should have layers of values. Now, this is dictated on how large your story is, or how large the scope is, how long the story is. Just remember, all of that stuff matters. Go see World Building 101. Yeah, do so in relation to the length of time that you have and the depth of story you want to tell. Now, we are come to the end. My typical housekeeping is, feed the algorithm gods, like, share, comment, let me know what you want to hear. Let me know what you thought about this. Do I need to clarify things more? I probably will do some sort of clarification or more in depth on this, but yeah. Oh, and there's going to be a worksheet below. I'm going to have some stuff for you. Hopefully it'll be good. I'm going to try to do more of that. These will be general tools. Modify them, use them how you want, whatever makes your process work. So, with all that being said, thanks for listening. I've got my link to my own books in the description below. I'm going to get back into the swing of getting more out. I just kind of got disheartened, and so I've got books sitting that are waiting for me to polish up and then send out. So you'll be seeing more books soon, and I'll announce it here on the channel. Go out and create something. Go do that. Make the world a better place with your stuff. Show me the conflict of values that exist inside you, and I can't wait to see them. I'm proud of you. Now go out and do the work. Archivist out.